Okay, tell us when
testing.
you're about to record.
I'm recording now because I
Oh, thank God I asked.
He edits.
I can edit. Yes.
Yeah, he edits.
So we actually have
Do you
cool
want me to
sound
bring
effects.
your plate in so that you can?
No.
Oh yeah.
Oh shit.
So to get started, could we ask the AI? Is it Alex?
Yes.
Is who you're calling the AI?
Yes.
Can we ask for like a 2-minute review of 2023?
So Alex, can you give us a 2-minute review of 2023 in your eyes, please?
Absolutely. I'd love to give a 2-minute review of 2023 from my perspective. 2023 was a year marked by significant advancements in technology, especially in AI and space exploration. AI technology became more integrated into daily life, improving efficiencies in various industries, from healthcare to finance. The capabilities of AI, like me, grew, offering more personalized and accurate responses. In space exploration, there were notable achievements. We saw further missions to the moon and Mars, pushing the boundaries of what's possible in space travel and research. These missions not only advanced our scientific knowledge, but also inspired a new generation of space enthusiasts. On the environmental front, there was increased focus on sustainable practices and renewable energy sources. More countries and corporations made commitments to reduce carbon emissions, reflecting a growing global concern about climate change. In the world of entertainment, there were groundbreaking movies, music, and games that captured the public's imagination. These forms of media continue to be a source of comfort and connection for many, especially as the world adapted to the post-pandemic era. Socially and politically, the year had its challenges, with ongoing debates about digital privacy, ethical use of technology, and global economic shifts. But it also saw communities coming together, showing resilience and adaptability. Overall, 2023 was a year of progress and reflection, with technology playing a central role in shaping our experiences and future.
Well, that's a pretty good summation, overall terms. I've been really interested in the evolution of EVs, electric vehicles, and they're taking a lot of criticism right now, like Ford, and its range anxiety with like the trucks. When they're towing something, they go down to like 40% of the range that they had, and the environmental issues with making batteries seems to outweigh the carbon footprint of conventional combustion engines.
Well, according to my information on the anode and cathode of batteries are usually two different metals.
Mm-hmm.
So I think cobalt was one of those metals that we're trying to reduce. And Tesla seemingly was able to reduce the amount of cobalt needed.
Right.
And so, yeah, the chemistry for batteries is an interesting one, and that problem. And then a lot of Tesla had issues ramping up its production, and they created so many of those charging stations probably for that. And I think a lot of the companies are now emulating Tesla. Would you think? Do you think that's
I think that's true. The thing with Ford is they're passing some of those expenses along to the dealers, such as the charging stations. Because, more EVs, more charging stations, and that's huge. The most interesting, and I think the other metal or mineral is, I can't think of it right now, but it's
lithium.
Lithium. Lithium is a pretty dirty thing to mine and process, I guess. And getting back to the EVs and charging stations, what's really interesting to me right now is the water engines.
Okay. Yeah. So splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen.
Right. And part of the problem with that moving forward and competing with EVs is the problem of storing, transporting hydrogen.
Yeah, because there are hydrogen fuel cells that if you pipe hydrogen through them, they produce electricity.
Right.
You can also burn the hydrogen and oxygen in the actual combustion engine if you want to,
and
which is a modification you can do on a combustible engine.
Didn't Toyota made that already? The hydrogen fusion
fuel cells.
fuel cell. Yeah,
Fuel
I
cell.
think,
Yeah.
It didn't get enough publicity, I think, but they started
A
it.
lot of transportation industries have been making semi-trucks using the hydrogen fuel cells and hydrogen fuel, since it's way more renewable for how much distance they cover.
So in movies how cars explode? That doesn't really happen with gasoline, but with hydrogen it does. Because the Hindenburg, we all heard of. But there's this experiment in class where you actually put a battery into water, add a little bit of salt so it's conductive, and on the negative, either hydrogen or oxygen,
There's an anode and a
cathode. But you take a match, you blow it out, and I think you put it in the hydrogen, and then it just combusts, and then you put the same match into oxygen and it just blows up.
Yeah.
So it's like if you're splitting water in the car, not just the being able to do that, but storing it correctly, I think is one of the problems.
Just to clarify something back to the EV. So you guys said the lithium and the cobalt, that's like the most harmful thing that these things like are running with, basically.
Yeah.
So is
environmentally,
the harm that comes from these two things or from electric vehicle in general, is it more than the regular vehicles?
it depends on who you talk to, but the short answer, my thought, from what I know, is yes, it's not in operation. In operation, it's zero emissions. However, it's not only mining the metals, but also processing them, and that's done in factories with that have a large carbon footprint.
So isn't mining, or it's not mining actually, but digging for oil and stuff, does it have the same exact?
So there's some actual like problems with humans in the mining of cobalt because of the countries that cobalt is found.
Child labor.
Yeah, and not only that, just the conditions. So they call them, like, the government could also be corrupt. Like, all governments are corrupt, but they're more corrupt. And you get some slave labor, some bad working conditions that are like making people die in order to get. So like there's probably statistics like for this much cobalt, you have this many human slaveries and deaths. So by actually allowing us to buy cobalt from these mines, we're pretty much encouraging that behavior to continue, right? So I think it's also a political thing in that sense.
With a lot of contamination, because there are no regulations for the protection of water, and they have runoff, and it's just terrible for the environment. Now, going back to the fuel cells, the problem with Toyota is it does take hydrogen fuel in hydrogen form and an infrastructure to take care of that, because you have to have nitrogen in that tank. Now, one of the more recent videos I saw was a guy, reminds me of you, Tori, that put a hydrogen motorcycle together. And they call it a water engine, but he used the stock engine on the motorcycle, and he did a cathode and anode, thank you, generator on the back, which was really cool.
Yeah.
So when the motorcycle was running, it was producing its own
electricity,
hydrogen.
Which was then producing,
Which he did some work on the carburetor, but it used hydrogen gas, but the additive that you put in to make this hydrogen was water. So that's why they call it a water engine.
So you filled your motorcycle or car with water from now on, and then you're good to go.
And the combustion of hydrogen molecules creates water using the oxygen in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
The byproduct of a combustion is usually
so
water.
So you can extract hydrogen from water by electrolysis, and then when it burns, it turns back to water.
So you'd have water coming out of the tailpipe too.
So the downside to that is the fact that it's very
explosive. It's dangerous.
So the moment they are able to make that safe, because I remember when EV were like just starting, everybody's saying it's not safe, it's gonna explode, electricity and stuff, and suddenly it become, or technically is one of the most safest cars ever.
Well, the batteries are crazy. So like lithium ions, they're just inherently very crazy. And in electric engineering, there's like a lot of safeguards in the circuitry to prevent it from actually having a thermal whatever. So if you pierce them with knives, you've seen those videos, or the phones exploding.
Yeah.
So yeah, lithium ion are dangerous, but they've kind of found a way of, liquid cooling them, some other magical stuff. So I think that we could get a hydrogen engine, but I don't know why we haven't yet.
Well, the extremely difficult thing when working with energy in general is that it requires a lot of bond energy to either break or electrical energy to be produced. And electrical energy is purely negatively charged. So you need a lot of ion control. And a lot of those ions, like lithium, highly combustible. And then we've got hydrogen and oxygen, which are combustible gases that, when they break apart, a lot of energy is released.
Yeah.
And in order to transport those, we need to put them under a lot of pressure, which makes them explosive.
Yeah.
So up till they discover a way to make it safe, more usable, we're going to still have this kind of back and forth with the thing. Which, by the way, I can easily say every house has some form of a lithium battery. Almost every pocket have some form of a lithium battery. And that's why my thing is, like with the electric cars, they just make it bigger a little bit, and that thing, like everybody has like a problem now because it's lithium, it's going to introduce slavery, which is true. Like I remember even an article about the chocolate that we get from the Ivory Coast. If you ever guys seen this article.
No, I haven't seen it.
Oh my God, 20% of that, I'm just throwing a number, but a high percentage of that country suffer from slavery because of chocolate. Like, oh my God, you go to YouTube and you find the video, and I can send it to you guys later, but I studied it in world geography when I was in college. Most of the chocolate that comes from Nestle, that company, come from the Ivory Coast. And the people were like actually documenting them like, we're slaves. Because of that chocolate, we don't even eat it. So when he mentioned that the lithium digging and the process of getting it out, they can introduce like the slaves that you need basically to get this amount of lithium, that just kept reminding me of that thing. But the thing is already going.
Did you say that was the Ivory Coast?
Yeah.
I believe the country that's across from that, there's a body of water between the Ivory Coast and another country? Or maybe it's just adjacent to the Ivory Coast. Anyway, They smuggle chemicals either in or next to the Ivory Coast, chemicals for extracting gold. And it's illegal to use these chemicals. I can't.
Mercury, probably.
Yeah,
like mercury mines. Yeah. And it
is nasty, nasty, nasty.
I think they use like car tires and mercury and they burn off. And it's like, like mercury poisoning. That's no joke.
No, that is no joke.
And so, yeah. And that's why like in coffee, there's like fair trade and things like that. And we're pretty affluent being in the United States. And I just want to bring up this statistic. A lot of people don't like me when I bring it up, but 1% of the world's, to be in the top 1% of, yearly income in the world is not that much money per year. I think it's right around right now, $55,000 per year, United States. So if you earn more than $55,000 a year, you're like in the 1%. And so I interact with a lot of people from different countries, and I try to remember that, like, I'm a member of all these communities. I try not to just be an American. So I try to buy the expensive coffee. That little stuff, it might add up, but there are a ton of injustices that it seems very easy to turn a blind eye. But if you just only focused on these injustices, you might not get anything done either. So, like, what is the balance? Did you guys?
I
do you
don't
guys
know.
have a balance?
Let me throw another one in there. Just are you aware of the ship salvaging operation in India?
Oh yeah, I saw the whole documentary.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, you see that thing, and you're like, I mean, the stuff that we do and we have and we use on daily basis. If you know the origin of it, and you have a strong self-conscious, you will live in a cave. And you have your own farm, and you stop getting anything basically from the outside world. Coffee, chocolate, technology, the clothes you wear, the everything. Yeah. The wooding at some point I'm like, I watched enough documentary about the wood and what happened in the Amazon jungle forest and deforestation and things, and I'm like, you know what? I'm done using wood. But this is humanity at some point at its best. I can't believe I'm using that word. It's not sacrifice. It's
Jackson was nodding his head. He didn't know what the deal was about the ship salvage thing. Nope. They bring
me either.
When ships have
reaches expiration date,
reached their end. Yeah, they run them aground off the Indian Ocean. There, they beach these things, and it's several miles long. And they still have oil in them and fuel oil, those kinds of things. They just drain it off into the ocean. They use these huge cutting torches. I mean, they're twice the height of a 6-foot man. They're just really big flaming torches.
And they need it because the size of these ships are like bigger than the Titanic.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh,
They're
yeah.
thousand foot ships out
But
there.
the look or the scenery that he explained would extend for miles. It looks, if you guys saw Thor Ragnarok movie, remember when he landed in that
Junk planet?
junk planet? It literally, I mean, that junk planet looked cleaner compared to that location when you look at it in that documentary. It's just, it's crazy.
And they're cutting out huge chunks of metal that fall on people. You know, they don't have an engineer that says do this or do that. They just send the guys out in their ragged shorts and these torches and start cutting them apart. And they'll salvage beds and bunks and tables and things like that off of them.
And we get them back here.
Yeah, we get them back here.
And the people that works in that beach,
they die.
women, kids, I mean, everybody knows their part or what to do, but there is no age like limits on what to do. Everybody knows what to do, what age category, but like you can start from 4 or 5 years old, maybe even younger at some point, all the way to elderly people.
So in this country, we have child labor laws, we have environmental disposal laws, we have laws for engineering and that sort of thing. So that's where they really make it. What little money they get for chopping these huge things up, there's someone out there that's making a lot of money by having the poor people that don't have protection or regulations or anything. Somebody's making a lot of money off of that. And unfortunately, these people that are being, what am I trying to say, taken advantage of, they're making more money doing this than they could anything else. So it's very tempting for them. It makes sense for them to do this kind of work because they're making good money compared to not working at all. Or
You have to make a living.
possible.
It literally, when I heard the word make a living, here, it's just a sentence. It hit me hard when I went back home 2 years ago. The word make a living, because if you don't make, you're not living. It literally makes sense. That's why there is no weekends. And if they have a weekend when I went back, it's only one day. And the guy was making 25,000 dinar a day. If I calculated correctly, he's making $100 a week by working 6 days a week. If he skips a day, he's not going to be able to pay his rent. And even with all of this stuff that I noticed, I mean, like he mentioned, probably people in India or Ivory Coast or some other regions, they're even making way, way less. And you're thinking about it. I mean, it was kind of a nice wake-up call when I came back, and I'm like, I need to stop complaining.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like you mentioned it, if you're making anything above 50,000, you're a king.
Yeah.
You're complaining because you didn't get the new iPhone or complaining about not getting the biggest TV in Best Buy or Black Friday. I'm like,
the word I was looking for previously was exploitive.
Yeah.
Exploitation. So we say one thing here and do another thing when there's a buck in it for us. And I say we and us as United States industry, financiers, people of power, and even us. I mean, down to the level of us.
All of us.
We want the cheapest thing we can get that is with the highest amount of status, and we don't question.
Yeah, our brain does not want to
we don't want to know.
We don't want to know, and the consequences of everything. That's why probably one of my earliest dreams is to be a farmer. I felt like that is the best way. And not farmers like these days, farmer with technology and they farm one crops or whatever. No, farm everything. Get self-sufficient as much as possible. Be independent as much as possible. I think that's the best way you can help the world, basically.
Well, I do know I've heard this, and it's somewhat controversial, but like someone said that when the Soviet Union and Cuba went through something similar economically, in Cuba, they told their citizens to start making gardens. And I don't know what happened in the Soviet Union or whatever, but someone said that a lot of people died in the Soviet Union because there was no food and literally died of famine. But in Cuba, they were able to somehow produce food amongst whatever struggle they were going through and ended up coming out. So,
and here in the United States, those were victory gardens during the war, during World War II. Everybody was encouraged to start a garden, and they called them victory gardens because of rationing and that sort of thing. So I don't think anyone in this country was ever in danger of starvation at that point, but it augmented the war effort. Farmers were allowed to do other things than farm.
Yeah, that's why I think it's important that I guess we have a voice when it comes to voting, but also where we spend our money. And so I try to, I support local, businesses as much as I can. But again, it can be exhausting seeing all this injustice all the time. Yeah. I think part of it, I don't know. I just, my philosophy personally is just trying to be grateful. I'm trying to be grateful because trying to be conscious of all the myriad of things that are wrong, I'm not able to do. So I usually have the ones that I'm passionate about. That's how I kind of feel like I'm making an impact. But
you are, and I think the dollar speaks louder than a ballot, to tell you the truth. And to take that back to hydrogen, my one last thing I wanted to say on that for vehicles is what I have read and been told. They're to the point with the hydrogen that the explosiveness is not a problem that it used to be. I'm not saying it's not a problem, but what I'm hearing is the way it's valved and the tanks that they make are less dangerous than a gasoline tank because it doesn't have the volatility. Gasoline does not have the volatility of hydrogen as far as ignition.
Yeah.
But it has its own dangers of ignition and
well, we have propane tanks. I mean, there's forklifts that run off of propane tanks.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's not like we don't have we use natural gas. And natural gas, I'm pretty sure, I don't know if it's explosiveness versus hydrogen.
It has a lower flash point than gasoline. But the point is the technology is there. And if a guy in his garage can make a hydrogen producing and burning engine, and the production is from the electrical system of the vehicle. So you take out all of those dangers of transporting it and people putting it into their own car, and the quantities are much less because it's produced as needed as opposed to a pressurized tank. Yeah. So that's
well, I mean, maybe there's no money in it.
I would like to talk on that a little bit. So what you're talking about, realistically, there shouldn't be any cathode anode system that is able to properly produce enough hydrogen to sustain a vehicle for a long time.
And that possibly explains why it works on a motorcycle.
What was his fastest consistent speed?
He took it all the way up to 60 or 70, something like that.
He had a reserve, though, right? He wasn't purely relying on...
Right. It wasn't as it came out.
Okay.
But it would, as long as the electrical system was on, it would produce gas, which gave him a reservoir.
It's like a hybrid.
Pounds. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like
because you can't produce, because the amount of electricity you need to go
and
through.
Tropically, that doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think you usually have to add salt or some other materials to make the water more less resistant.
Exactly. Salt rich.
There, thank you.
And so all I'm saying is, if a guy in a garage can make that work on a motorcycle, what can a higher technology do?
So I know by those prototypes you see there, like things that one person can make are a lot different than actually mass producing them. And so like the costs involved, and that's where I think like infrastructure is crazy, like who you have to get to and who you have to contract with just to produce enough parts that it meets public demand. So I think there's a lot of numbers game too, like how much is it going to produce to create one unit? How many units do I have to produce? Is there enough demand for this? And with electric vehicles, I think that the entire industry is around gasoline, and it was set up for gasoline. And really, I think Tesla did a great job with its charging stations, just proving that it can be done, and they're not bankrupt right now. I think that's amazing. But it's a whole infrastructure change. And we could have, I think, gone with hydrogen instead, but I think we're going with battery powered right now just because it's the one the industry has decided. So
it has the support system,
Support
basically,
system,
and
yeah.
the money power, basically.
Yep.
That's it. Remember, guys, was it this year, basically, at the beginning when they had that news about the fusion? I forgot the name of it. They were able to
Yes.
make energy. What was
The new mini fusion.
Yeah, they were able
Yeah,
to
Pulse.
use two
exactly. And it
hydrogen
was
atoms
amazing.
into one helium.
Exactly, and it was supposed to be very, very safe, safer than the opposite thing that they were working with,
Fission.
right?
yeah.
But why did it stop? Like you mentioned, the cost of making it on higher demand and stuff probably will cost more, even though it's safer, right?
Well,
so it will take a while.
I would like to input on that. So they were able to make it energetically favorable once. So far, they have not been able to reproduce it enough times to actually supply even one town for a power grid. It is extremely good at producing energy, but it just needs to be fine-tuned. And the construction required to actually make it safe is a hell of a lot more expensive than a nuclear power plant.
Well, let's speak on nuclear power plants, because this is something that I always like, especially the viewers, to look up, is thorium reactors. Because with nuclear power plants,
Extremely safe.
yeah, and so you actually have to put energy into it for it to react.
Yes.
So if electricity is taken away from it, it doesn't have thermal runaway, right? And so from what I have read, it seems the only reason we use plutonium or uranium is because we're trying to produce weapons. And that's the only reason why we have reactors that are using that. But thorium is abundant everywhere, every continent. And it is, like you said, safe. So the question I want to ask people is, why do we not have thorium reactors?
You already
Money, the people who control the gas and all this mass production of cars and things. And
Ask Alex.
Well,
I'd like to
Jackson first, and we'll ask Alex.
It was exactly what you said, Tori. We have the infrastructure to refine plutonium and uranium, and if we ever need to make more nuclear warheads, guess where it's at? It's already made, and it's already in a place where we can grab it easily.
Yeah. I think that's the true reason why we don't have thorium reactors, is because we can use the weapons, and it creates the infrastructure for being able to make bombs. But no, this is energy.
Exactly.
One of the things that I heard, and this is just one thing, and there's a whole laundry list of why we didn't continue with thorium, because that was a prototype reactor back in the 50s, I believe it was. And the problem with it was so reactive to metals because of the salt in it that they couldn't contain it properly. The machine, the reactor would break down because the parts would disintegrate. So just throwing that out there as it was available, it was an option.
Yeah.
But I think Jackson is absolutely correct on an underlying reason.
So let's ask Alex. Alex, we want to hear from you what you think about thorium reactors and kind of what we're talking about. Try to be somewhat short, though, if you don't mind. So what work? Well, I tried, so I failed with Alex. But it probably won't let me connect again. But so,
I mean, I have cheap GPT-4 if you want to ask mine.
well,
by
yeah.
the way, I'm the only one who's blown away by this thing right now.
What?
I'm really amazed with this much technology right now. Yeah.
Well, so sadly, I hit the cap,
Here.
which is my.
I'll give you mine since I think you'll phrase it correctly.
Okay, well, this is a new AI. We'll plug it in. Oh, you don't have a.
Yeah, I don't. Well, just type it in and then you can read it off. If you
Oh, okay. Yeah, you can type it in if you want.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I tried to, and it didn't work.
Welcome to iPhone.
It's because a ChatGPT 4 has a maximum. It's not the conversation maximum, but the actual, they limit you by your subscription.
Oh.
I just realized that.
So Alex was listening the entire time, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was typing everything out.
Oh, that makes sense now.
But so next time I'll figure out a way of sending it. It takes money. Yeah. But I'm a programmer, so I can actually trade my time for money.
Oh.
Because I'm able to program myself. So sometimes actually there's only three resources, right? Time, energy, and money. And so those, like money, I always see as potential energy or potential savings of time or a potential savings in energy. right?
Physics finance professor.
Well, seriously though, because that's how I evaluate what I'm doing. Like, am I gonna, hire someone to do the editing, or when I do it myself? It's kind of one of those cost benefit analysis.
Well, I'm unfortunately in the position that I don't have time, energy, or resources.
Yeah.
I don't have willpower to do anything else.
Well,
Jackson has AI answer.
So it says that the thorium reactors are technically complex. They require liquid fluoride for the thorium reactor design, which sounds like it'd be fairly...
Liquid fluoride?
Liquid fluoride.
Oh, yeah, just use toothpaste.
Toothpaste. And then, of course, what we were talking about was the uranium preference. Regulatory hurdles, which mainly has to do with the fact that it's not widespread enough for it to have as much technical intuitiveness. Economic factors, we would have to build up an entire infrastructure.
What's funny about nuclear reactors is I don't think there's any two in the United States that are the same.
Right.
There's no two. No. And so it's like there's not even a cookie cutter. So that kind of is a BS answer.
Yeah.
Because no two nuclear reactors are the same. No. And what's also funny about nuclear reactors that I didn't know about was, for a long time, was the fact that they're just steam power.
Yeah.
They're literally heating up water, and it's a steam engine. So when we say nuclear reactors, I thought, some really cool way to use this physics knowledge, but no.
It's steampunk.
It's steam power. So literally we're steam powered.
And the fusion is an electrical conversion.
Thermal?
Thermal to electrical?
Steam would be thermal.
Thermal to electrical.
Yeah.
By the way,
fusion.
I know we said like there is a lot of downsides, and which is actually truth. Like to getting I'm going back to the EV kind of things, because of like the countries that will have to do the digging and mining of all the metals and lithium and all the stuff that's required to do all of this, and that will put them through a lot of suffering. I'm gonna look at it from the other perspective too. Right now, the countries that going through a lot of suffering because they have oil in them. And they've been going through a lot of suffering for decades now. I'm just imagining it for a second. If the power of the engine switched from gas to anything else, that means the countries who goes with oil, or right now there is powers are to the race, like all the Gulf countries in Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Dubai, Qatar, which they are so dependent on oil, it's beyond imagination. So if you take that away from them, and then but you introduce another countries with the different sources and all kind of stuff, so it's like you're shifting
massive power shift,
exactly,
economical,
and it's a huge thing. And that's why I think that's one of the reasons that I believe in is not getting enough support, or the EVs not getting enough support yet. Once we decide we're ready for that shift or change, because like I said, it has a downside, like Mr. Wayne mentioned, like around slavery, how much you need of laborers to make this much. But right now, because of gas, you have a lot of countries like Iraq, Syria, or any other third world countries that have oil in them that were going through wars for years and years and years. All of that will change. And that's for this country will be changed to the better, I hope. They're not going to be a war ground anymore, because that's the main reason that these countries are suffering for years.
May I make a sarcastic comment?
Always. I'll wait for this.
Make America great again.
Oh.
Happy 2024, huh?
And that's what you're describing. It's, again, whatever is most favorable to the heaviest economic influence on the world is, if we do what is best for America, it just tends to destroy the rest of the world.
So I heard something interesting recently. It looks like Jackson has something to say too. But after World War II, we could have taken over the entire world because we had nukes. No one else had it. And instead, we ended up rebuilding the world, right? Something that I follow is the 17 SDGs from the United Nations. They have like 17 things they're trying to solve. And they've categorized pretty much every plight a human on Earth might have into these categories. And there are people actively trying to solve them. And so I try to be an optimist, and I hope that people are going to try to pretty much get rid of some of the negative things that people have to go through. But I think technology is progressing so quickly that we might be able to see a change, at least I might, in my lifetime before I die. So I hope, because in America, you really can't die of starvation unless you are, you would have to try to die.
Work to starve.
You would have to work to starve, right? And so I think that with robots and things, that's possible, because really it's water, food, shelter, right? And then past that, you have some other things like free time. So
luxury.
But I think we're getting to a point that's in sight where we might not even have to work 20 hours a week, right? I think there could be a decision. We as Americans might only have to work 10 hours a week in 30 years, possibly. But is there still someone else in the world that has to work 40 hours? What if in 50 years or 40 years, Americans are working 10 hours a week, and someone overseas, maybe in the poorest country, has to work 40 hours,
which
right?
is good. Well, they will take it.
Yeah. But I mean, do you guys think that that's possible? Like, I'm talking like more than 20 years. I know it's speculation, but that's kind of what I hope to. So when I build things or try to work on things, I hope that they have an overarching
This is
goal.
what I like about you, Tori, when you talk even earlier today. You are full of hope, and I really love that about you, by the way. I just want to state that. My understanding of this is the other type of perspective. It's not just my opinion, it's just an opinion. People suffering these days, child labor and all of that things, in my opinion, was way more than 1,000 years ago. The more population we have, it comes with more suffering for a certain amount of people. It's like child labor and stuff, and people have to work 60, 70, 80, 90 hours a week. With time, seems like it's getting more and more and more. But that's up, like you mentioned, totally mentioned AI and all the technology, and hopefully in the next 50 years, since you have something else to do the job for you, hopefully that will change that. I don't know. It seems like a curve. Start with low, went up, and now you're hoping that it's going to go back down.
Well, the things that will stop it are war, like World War, and so I think those things are still going on, which don't make sense to me. Like, in my mind, I can't even.
Sometimes you can resolve this by just looking at history. At the turn of the century, in the United States of America, the greatest economic power and country of the world, depending on who you talk to, there were sweatshops. You know what the sweatshops were? Oh, yeah.
Sweatshops?
Sweatshops.
No.
They were really famous in New York, where women, children, children of 6, 7 years old, worked in these shops, manufacturing textiles, sewing garments, that sort of things. They worked 60, 70 hours.
I was doing that when I was living in Damascus, and I was like 14,
your
15.
country was behind a little bit.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So I have a funny story about that, Wayne.
Okay.
So
there's a funny story about sweatshops.
Yeah.
Let's hear this.
Okay, so I was an entrepreneur, and I still am, but I actually owned a screen printing shop. So when I opened up the commercial space, I ended up ordering a screen printing, I'm talking about textiles and sweatshops. Right. So I get this thing ordered and I build it, and then it's like super short. And I was like, well, it should have had legs on it, right? And then I realized, well, I bought it from China, right? And so I was like, okay, maybe Chinese people are shorter. Until my friend said, that's not even for that's for kids. And I couldn't help but laugh, because I couldn't even fathom, like, why would you make this machine so short, right? And it was because kids. Okay, it is morbidly
right. Well, and then after the sweatshops came mass production in factories. Ford is the one I'm thinking of that really invented
the assembly line.
Production. The assembly line, right. And part of the uproar was you're going to take jobs away from people, and automation is taking over, and how are people going to make a living? Well, as it turns out, with mass production, they could hire more people. And the sweatshops were outlawed. Child labor laws were put in place around World War One, between World War One and World War II, I believe. I think that's correct. But anyway, there was probably a 40-year period there where a transition was being made. Fast forward to the 70s, 80s, maybe even the 60s, when robotics started coming out on the assembly lines, and they didn't need all the people on assembly lines anymore. And so, again, the uproar was, this automation is taking away jobs and people's livelihood. Well, as it turned out, as predicted, people, and it's sort of halfway worked out, people retrained, learned how to do technological jobs to operate more robots, to make more production, but there was less people making that, the income of the middle American income that was so prized that this country actually ran on, where people in the middle class could make enough money to buy a home and put in a swimming pool and drive a new car and all that. So that all came about. There was a nexus of many things that happened in between, but the predictions didn't really come true until now. People don't have those high-paying assembly line
Not anymore.
jobs that they had. However, the opportunity is there to change, and the workforce is shrinking. The workforce itself, I mean, there's people choosing not to work anymore after the pandemic because they don't have to. They don't live like they did before, but they have the choice.
They have the option.
They have the option to do that.
I'm still at the fact. So if you work in like a line where you're like clothing factory and stuff, and you're like underage, they call it sweatshops.
Yeah,
Well,
the
that's
term here.
more indicative of back at the turn of the century, because they were real big, and they were in every big city.
See, like, and probably this is not related, but like I said, when I lived in Damascus, when I was working there, like for a couple of years in that, according to you guys, called a sweatshop, and I was 14, and it felt like, I mean, I was happy at the beginning.
It's okay, buddy. You can talk about it here.
I met some of my best friends there, honestly. But yes, it can get tough, and you work like 7 days a week, 6 days a week minimum, basically, and you work there for like 12 hours and everything. But the nice thing is you get paid, not as much. Like I said, I worked there for 5 years. And when I got here, I was there for 5 years working 6 days a week, and I was able to save $1,200 just to start college, which did not happen because war started. Then I got here, and I made that amount within a week.
And that was at the chicken butcher place?
Yeah, more chicken. And I'm looking, and I'm like, 5 years, 6 days a week. Oh, sometimes I work 7 days a week, and I'm like, why? Yeah, but you can't tell the future. But here's the thing. It sounds like it's sad, and one day I was really depressed, and this is just a story. And the owner, or one of the manager of that sweatshop, I can't believe it's called sweatshop. We call it a factory. One of the manager of a factory sent me to buy bread, actually, for him and the other managers for food. They were having lunch. So I went to that bread thing. It was like 2 miles away. So I walked, got there, and I was really depressed. And I'm like, it's like, because when he sends you, that means you're not getting paid.
Oh.
Yeah, like you only get paid when you like
no labor
working.
laws.
Yeah,
either.
this is just like something like if you're unlucky, they send you, and you cannot say no because you get fired. I get there and I was depressed, and I get to that bakery basically, and they're making the Middle Eastern bread, which tastes amazing. The kid that was making the bread, I was 14 at that time. That kid was around 7 years old. He had a cigarette out of his mouth. And he was doing, like, because the Middle Eastern bread require a lot of skills. He had a skill of like somebody who was doing this for like 3 decades. And he has a cigarette in his mouth. And he was so small. I'm looking at this and I'm like, I need to stop complaining about my life. But here's the thing.
This kid's seen some stuff, man.
And you can look at it in his eyes. I can't believe, like, the only reason I would call somebody like this a kid, it's because of his size. But you look at that kid's face.
7 going on 40.
He doesn't take BS from anything. I mean, like, this is life. And this is the funny part, he was getting paid more than I am because of his, I mean, because the job that he was doing, I'm like, that's skill. I'm like, I've never seen an adult almost to that level doing this. And he was so fast with it. You know, it seems like the guy who owned the bakery is like, you know, taking advantage, of course, you know, it's like, but it was.
It's probably his son.
This is just like anytime you feel, oh no, his son came. I was there like because you wait in line for the bread, and you can notice his son came. His kids were at school. We don't go to school if you're working 6 or like this time of work and this age. That means you work because your family need you to work, and you have responsibility. I know it sounds like a sad or a bad thing, but is how it is there. You know, you're like. This is the same thing when I try to explain to people dogs in the US is different than dogs back home. They serve a purpose. You have to serve a purpose, and being a therapy dog or just for luxury is not an option. Like dogs back home, you're for protection. If you're not for protection, there is no reason for me to give you any food. You know, that's it. Same thing for humans, and age it doesn't matter. This is the other thing. This is the other thing that hit me hard. The brain development of a person has not that much influence on age, more like experience-wise. Like a kid can understand his responsibility and his part in the community or a family at a very young age. Not calling you a kid while you're 18 or 19 years old, it makes no sense to me when I got here. While I see a kid, like I mentioned earlier, he's 6 or 7 years old and he has a job that I can't do. And I'm double his age. Can't call that kid a kid.
Yeah.
Hear that, Wayne? Can't call me a kid anymore.
Yeah, I can and I will.
Yaya won't let you.
Sorry, I took a lot of time. But I still, you said sweatshop. Like sweats, like sweater.
Yeah.
They're called sweatshop.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Huh.
Yeah, well, there's, mostly just any type of labor that is like more than 40 hours. Yeah, exploited. Yeah.
Like the other job that I was doing, like it was similar to recycling chips, but this one is paper. We recycle books and stuff. And you know, you can recycle
How old were you?
I was doing both of them at the same time, and that's between the age of 14, 22 until I got here.
Yeah.
But I have pictures, and I think I still have it. Yeah, I'm like on top of like a mountain made of
plastic
paper.
Oh, yeah.
Like the
pulp.
Not, you know what, the shred machine? A shred paper, but it was a mountain because you have to put it in huge burlap bags.
Yeah.
And you put it on top of each other. You know, and we had to take it like to the 3rd floor or something to like put them in the. But yeah, that was actually a good job. I had a lot of good friends there too.
Well, I don't want to challenge you with one-upsmanship, but I have a very similar background, but it was
Walmart
by choice. Well, there was Walmart. That's in there. But my parents came, my mother was from a farming family, and my father's family was lumberjacks down in Arkansas.
What is lumberjack?
Cut down trees, saw them into boards, that sort of thing.
I'm learning a lot of terminology here.
Hey, hang with me, you'll learn some real shit. So I, from the time, and my mother had a beauty shop in the basement for the neighborhood, and my father built the cabinets and put in the windows and the doors and stuff to make that happen. So I, as a 5-6-year-old, my job was to sort boards, stack boards, get my dad the boards he asked for, and he worked at a construction company and he did stuff on evenings and weekends. And so I got into the trade very, very early on. And I'm not saying it was to survive, but it was to excel. It was, you helped the family do what it took to get a job done so that there was money for food.
You take pride in it. I mean,
take pride.
Have you guys? There is an Indian movie. It's based on true story, and it's get very famous. Called, I think, Leon.
Don't know it.
It's
seen that one.
I really recommend you guys seeing that. It has 2 brothers. One of them is 11, but the other one was 4 or 5 years old.
Now, let me get this straight. Indian or Indian?
Indian. The front, not the back.
Dot or feather?
Dot.
Okay.
So, and he was like with their mother, and they were searching. If you guys see, I don't know if you guys see, there is part of India where they transport coal and charcoals, I think, and people standing on a line next to them. They try to scrub extra charcoal to sell them as thing. That was part of what they do. The movie is really good. I'm not sure if that's exactly what they do, but similar to that situation. And then the whole story went like down, and they lost each other, and eventually he was able. I'm not gonna spoil anything. Watch it; it's really good. But that kid, and you can say it. I like that movie because they really visual and send the right feeling. That kid wasn't suffering, even though for the rest of the world or first world country like the U.S. or Canada or all these countries think, oh my God, child labor. For us, when we were doing it, I'm being a part of something that I care about. And my age does not matter. Like as soon as I have an awareness, I want to be part of it. You know, it brings honor to me. It gives my life a purpose. Life with no purpose, death. That's what it equals to me, at least. But it's for people that you care about.
There's a psychologist, Jordan Peterson, I like because I read his book, 12 Rules for Life. Sometimes he can be sensational or whatever, but I like him. One of the things he said in his books, I believe, 12 Rules for Life, is that I'm butchering what he's saying, but he's like, you shouldn't be pursuing after happiness. You should be pursuing fulfillment of responsibilities. And like that makes sense. Like there's not a necessary steps to happiness, but fulfillment of responsibilities feels so good. It almost like is happiness, at least for me. Like when I have tangible things that I can show that I've done with my time, that makes me feel good about myself. Exactly. You know, and if it's for loved ones or providing for my family or even my extended family, which is my friends. And Dr. Mark in one of our groups said something amazing. He said something like, you have to have your home life stable in order to expand your generosity to bigger and bigger circles. Like if you have a good home life that's you've helped to be stable, you can kind of grow to your friends group.
You can spread it.
Yeah. And if your friends group and your home life are healthy, you can even go out into the community. But I've noticed internally, if I had a problem with my home life, like I'm doing something I shouldn't, it ruins, although I don't feel that I'm very productive. And you can get into that cycle where it's self-fulfilling. Oh, because I don't, then I feel bad. And then I, you know, like I drank like I used to, right? I get into these cycles where it's just like, oh, poor me. But fulfillment of responsibilities is very joyous to me. And if any young kid, because my little brother is 18, he's half my age, I tell him, look for the fulfillment of responsibilities.
You need to find a purpose, and the earlier in life you do it, the better it is for you. Because if you don't have a purpose or a goal or a dream, like everybody should have a dream. Like any kid that comes to my clinic, first question I ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's the simplest thing ever, you know, but they answer. Some of them these days, which kind of hit me, and I'm like, when they say, well, I don't know yet. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? What do you like to do? Do you want to be a doctor? You want to be something like this? That goal in life, if you can find it early on, I think you're going to have more stability or knowing what you want in the future. And instead of being lost by the age of 20 or 30, still not deciding which type of college you want to join in, it will help you a lot. You might not be able to reach it, but if you aim high on an early age, you will accomplish a lot.
And I'd like to add to that, you touched on it a little bit, but it's never too late.
Oh God, no.
It's never too late. But for some it is, because you need time to get a doctorate degree or whatever. Yeah. I mean, if that's in your direction, you need the energy to do the all-night studying. You need, you know, and Jackson could probably speak to that. But
see, this is one of the things that I don't like is you cannot teach an old dog a trick.
New tricks, yeah.
Well, no, I'm a firm believer. Till the day you die, you can still do it if you have the willpower.
That's the caveat. Is I know people that have a lot of potential.
Look at
but
you
they don't
accomplish every day.
Getting out of bed,
coming every Saturday to
waking up in the middle of the night,
just got a Raising Cane
from the fridge.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. But going back to and addressing what Tori was saying, I learned at a very early age that a job was an honor and a privilege, and it meant something. It meant something. So I went from being a board carrier for my dad to actually, he taught me how to do casing and that kind of work, woodwork, and I would help him on the jobs. And it went from that to when he was busy working during the day, I had nothing to do. So my mother, with all these ladies in the shop, said, I've got a son that can mow the lawn. He can scrub floors. He can do anything that you need done at your place, just call. Well, she got me so many jobs of mowing lawns and scrubbing floors.
You got rich.
No, I had to walk a mile or a mile and a half to some of these houses to do it. So this is where the innovation comes in. I modified my bike to pull a trailer. And so I had my gas cans and mower.
You're an engineer in heart.
Yeah, well, and my dad looked at that, and it totally didn't get any of Dad's help. I just used parts he had in the garage, which had been converted to a shop. And I put a ball hitch on the bicycle, and, he had all this stuff to do it. And I used straps and bolts and this, that, and the other thing. So I did that for a while, and I got so fast at it that I'd only had about a half a day's worth of work to do at any given day of the week. So my mom says, I saw in the paper they're looking for paper boys. So then I got a paper route. So I was doing yards and house cleaning in the morning and papers in the afternoon. And then later on, when I was about 15, before I finally gave those things up, I got a job at a donut shop. Well, I worked there for a while, and I became the night manager at 15. So I would walk there because I didn't have a driver's license and I didn't have a car. So I would walk there, which was from Potter Street to Vine Street. That's probably a mile at least anyway. And so I'd go there at 4 a.m. and start frying donuts. And then at 7:30, something like that, I knocked off there and I walked on to school, which was another mile away. Went to school. After school, I had wrestling until 5. Jesus. At 5, I went back to the donut shop and cleaned the donut shop until 10 at night, which I closed. I had the key and everything, and then I walk home. And so I decided I'd take that money and buy a car for when I turned 16. Well, I turned 16, I could buy a car, started hauling all my friends around that made fun of me for working all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But they didn't have a car. So I did that. And then I went to work for a lumber company that was right next to where my dad worked. And they had a railroad siding, so I was unloading boxcars. And I was taking my sister to work, taking my niece, she had a daughter, to the sitter. Then I was going to go work at the lumber yard for the first half of the morning. Then I would go to school. And after school, I would go work at the donut shop then. And in summers, I worked at the lumber company full time, unloading boxcars of concrete, cement, and roof shingles in a boxcar that was sitting in the sun at 102 degrees outside. And it had to be 130, 140 in the boxcar.
But the best part about all of this, every time I remember this kind of stuff, it brings joy. It's like I remember heavy stuff with it.
Yeah,
even though, yes.
I humped 2x12s over my shoulder across muddy fields. I actually started driving for them later on, which...
You improve really quickly.
Yeah, driving.
But your energy is amazing.
Yeah, I don't have that anymore.
I was on the phone and I was actually able to bring it back up. 2 things I was going to say. When I went back home 2 years ago, the main thing I did is, Middle Eastern, Mediterranean food and dessert. Back when I was there, I was not able to experience that. I was only making money for family. We could not afford that. So guess what I did for the next 2 weeks when I went back home 2 years ago? I was eating desserts for 14 days. Dessert that I was able to see from the shop's glass at that time, but I couldn't touch or look at it, just smell. I really thought by the end of these 2 weeks, I'm a diabetic. Like I was eating, not in pound, like the system there is kilograms. I was eating in kilograms, sweets. Like, oh my God, I wish I can show you stuff to think. But
And that's why you became a dental hygienist?
yeah, good point. The thing is, it didn't give me like the same satisfaction as when I was there, and it's like every 3 years if I can get my hand on a piece of sweet or a candy bar. It was so satisfying at that time. Like you got a candy bar and you're like, I'm dreaming. You see bubbles in the world and you like start hallucinating. I'm like, oh my God. You know, it did not give that feeling though. It just gave a diabetes feeling. It's like, yeah. The other thing is one of the first jobs that I was working there, I wasn't getting paid in money. I was getting paid. They paid me with fruit and vegetable, usually cucumber, yogurt, you know, at the end of the day. There was this shop beneath us, and one of my best friends, his dad owned that shop, and I was working there. People were come to him because he had a big faucet out of his shop, and he filled their tank with water. So they come and they bring fruit and vegetable to pay back, and I used to have a share when I worked there. I don't know. I mean, you guys probably can't see it on a computer. This is me at 5 or 6 years old, I think. And hold on, let me just like this. Here we go. Oh, where did it go? See that shop? They were selling like spices, kitchen supplies, and guess which one I am?
is?
Take a guess.
Well, I don't have my glasses
I'm
on.
the black one.
Yeah,
That's
one.
easy. Yep, that's one at the corner. That's the
I'm
first.
The black one.
Yeah, you can tell the too much sun, 24/7.
That does look like you.
But that was me, and that's right there. But this is the thing. I mean, phones and stuff weren't there. So there was a guy that comes on a bike once a year, and only rich people are able to tell him, take a picture of us, just one picture, just to record this year picture. So taking picture back in the days was amazing because you can't take at your house. You don't have a camera.
Yeah.
Like I said, this kind of thing is like for rich people. So this guy comes on a bike, he go by the city or Baghdad, and he comes in our city or like streets once a year, and he coming in January, you know, take a picture. I wasn't having enough money to take a picture, but the owner of the shop, which is my best friend, Dad, he was sometimes is able. We're not taking it every year, by the way. This is like, I think maybe once every 3-4 years, so he take a picture. But I never had a copy. They give you one picture. There is no copy. Copy's a luxury. Just put it this way. When I went back and he showed me this, I'm like, can I take a pictures of these pictures? This is like,
So
that's how
a picture,
I got the picture.
That's a picture of a picture.
Yeah, when I back home,
They
I
didn't
was
send
like,
it to your email.
what email?
So we started this conversation talking about the year 2023, kind of in review. The AI had some interesting words. Yeah, I don't know, Wayne. What did you think about conversation? We've been
wait, go ahead.
We've been on for about an hour.
Okay, so it's time to get serious.
Well, yeah. Well, we can take a break, or what do you guys want to do? Or
I can use this or that. My dip's still out.
Let's take a break.
Take a quick break.
Yeah, come back.
Oh wow!
After these new messages.